Hello, welcome to Podsongs, where I interview inspirational people as inspiration for new songs. Simple. Today's guest is not a famous, but he's got a lovely story. He's a touring cyclist. I met him a long time ago. I think it was in Amsterdam. Through the wonders of the internet, we've kept in touch. Now he's in Africa. Now, cycling through Africa is tough, even in the good times. But during a pandemic, but he's making a good fist of it. And I wanted to give him some support. So have him on the show, have a quick chat, get some inspiration back. Let's enter the nomadic world of Ted Kunz. Great to speak to you. It's been a while.
It's funny, yeah. I mean, I was thinking the other day how we met in Amsterdam, went for that ride, but I'm not even sure how we initially met. And my best guess is you must have been doing a gig somewhere, and we started talking.
Yeah, because it was around the Toy Boy launch, I think.
Yeah, that Toy Boy video is amazing. I mean, and the other song I like is The Hard Way. Well, there's so many, but I mean, The Hard Way.
Huh.
you know I'm talking about how you the relationship song about learning about me the hard way, right? Of course you do. You've always sung it 1,000 times.
Yeah, that's old, Jack. I mean, that's long. I was singing about relationships back then.
Yeah, I mean, there's another one called The Cedar Room or something. It was a little darker, more of a it was all good. So that's how I remember you riding bikes and writing interesting songs. I lost touch with you for 10 years, and now here we are.
Yes, yeah, because I went traveling as well by bicycle, so we have these parallels.
Wait a minute, remind me. I totally forgot about that. Where did you go again?
I went around New Zealand and Australia and into Asia.
Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow. We need to talk about that. I should. I mean, that's like a whole topic I'd like to delve into for another hour.
Well, this is your show. This is your hour. So, So where are you now? You're in Africa.
Yeah, I'm in Kenya. I'm in Central Highlands and like the foothills of Mount Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a spectacular peak, about 5,000 meters. And I'm stuck here. I mean, this is sort of an accident. I was on my way north to Cairo. The only safe way north, really, and that safe is all relative, is through Ethiopia. So I pedaled all the way to the border of Kenya and Ethiopia, and Ethiopia is closed. So no getting into Ethiopia, and South Sudan and Somalia are not exactly palatable options. So I turned around and came back to central Kenya, where I'm sitting here kind of in a holding pattern, but a good one. It's nice.
Well, you must be one of the only people who wants to get into Ethiopia at the moment.
Right. I mean, they've got a war going on in the north, but from what I've talked to, my plan was to just pedal to Addis Ababa, which is very central, and I think the south is okay, at least I think. But that was the initial plan: is get to Addis Ababa and then take the temperature and see about getting north. And of course, if that's not possible, I'm in Addis Ababa, which is a cool sort of cosmopolitan city, I've heard. And I had I could always stay there a while, or I could fly out of Addis Ababa. But now I can't even get into Ethiopia at all, so that's not happening.
Okay, well, maybe give us a bit of backstory here about you, how you became the wheeled wanderer.
Yeah, I mean, it's like any history. They say you have to start at the beginning if you're going to understand everything else. But I think it actually started as a kid. I mean, as a kid, I just like to wander around. And once I got a bicycle and got the fitness and a good bicycle and the fitness to ride 100 or 200 kilometers or miles even, I had a lot of freedom. So I had the freedom to just leave and be totally independent and ride a bicycle and explore. And then as life went on, and through college, I just kept going further and further away, and my career took me further and further away. And I think even within the physical movements of getting further from home, I was always wandering in my head or whatever city I was in. I lived in New York City for a lot of years. I just used to wander the streets of New York forever. So I've always had this probably slightly unhealthy wandering habit, just curiosity, just always wanting to see new things. And then I think about the time I met you 12 years ago. I went through an odd career change. That's an incredible story itself. But I ended up disappearing on a motorcycle to ride around the U.S. and I started hanging out in southern Arizona in this art colony, this old abandoned mining town on the Mexico border. And I started doing little explorations into Mexico. And then those led to bigger explorations and more curiosity. And then eventually I've traveled all the way from the U.S. to the southern tip of Argentina and back on a motorcycle. And then in early 2019, I was in a career again, and it was going nowhere. And I just was dying to get out of there and begging these guys to fire me. And finally, they just let me resign. And I convinced them that the business that they wanted me to do had no hope. And I took off on a motorcycle again. I took off on an off-road motorcycle. I went back to Argentina. But when I got to Argentina, this was December 2019. I started thinking, what's next? And I started looking at Africa. I started looking at getting the motorcycle across to Africa and all the complications. The motorcycle is kind of a piece of junk anyway. So I ended up leaving the motorcycle in Uruguay. And I flew to Cape Town, South Africa, where I got a bicycle, a pedal bicycle. And I just started pedaling north. So I bought a touring bike with all the packs. And I just started heading north with a loose idea of take the safe route to Cairo.
So you sold all your possessions and you've given up your apartment and you've done the thing where you...
That's basically it. And part of the reason I'm able to do this is because I didn't have many possessions to begin with. I was always sort of a simple guy. So I think it makes it easier to just walk away. So yeah, back to April 2019, when I first left my apartment, I lived in a tiny apartment in my home state of Idaho. And I just thought, well, let's just go. Let's get out of here. I'm sick of this stuff. Sick of the day to day, sick of the same pubs and the same pints and the same people and the same revolving door of bad but fun relationships. And, a lot of people can
relate to that. I mean, but they've got the inertia, that they just can't do that trip, and can't break free,
There's a few things that hold people back. Some of them are good, like they're raising a family or they have a career they really enjoy, but others I think sometimes it's just a mental trap. You just have to decide to do it. You have to believe you can, and you have to know that you truly don't need that much money to do this. I mean, my budget is like $25,000 a year,
Gosh,
and that's constantly. Yeah, you can't even sit in the United States with your thumb up your butt for a year for that much money and have zero fun. So you could either sit at home and do nothing, or you can go travel around for $25,000 or less. And $25,000, I mean, I'm living pretty well. I eat out all the time. That includes a lot of exploration and some connecting flights, connecting boats once in a while. I mean, you name it. There's a lot in there, and it makes it very easy to just sort of walk away.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, when I did the Americas for the third time, the length of the Americas by motorcycle, but then I started in Cape Town, South Africa on a bicycle in February of this year, of 2020.
Okay.
And I didn't really prepare for this, riding a motorcycle around. I was, hiking and running, but I didn't really prepare to ride 100 or 200 kilometers, or typically 130 kilometers a day. So those first few weeks out of South Africa and into Namibia, I suffered just like a wild dog out there. I mean, it was the hottest time of the year. It's 41 degrees out there Celsius, and just dying. My butt was sore. My knees hurt. Everything was tough. And I just headstrong pushed it through. I was basically in a habit of riding 130 kilometers one day, the next day, take the day off. And I repeated that cycle for about a month. They got me up to Windhoek in central Namibia. And by then I was starting to get some fitness. And by then the COVID was starting to set in, right? And it's starting to see this in the news. And of course it started and it was so bad in Italy, as you well know. And we all had our eyes on it, but then it became obviously a global pandemic. And I barely made it out of Namibia into Zambia. I think I crossed into Zambia. I passed a quick COVID screen. And the very next day, or maybe the day after that, they closed the border, a hard close. So now I'm in Zambia. I have no friends, no idea what I'm doing. And I'm watching this global pandemic and imagining the Black Plague, and that we're going to have people everywhere just dropping dead, which obviously, tragically, a lot of people are. But it's not nearly at the rate I was expecting. But at the beginning, I was quite worried. Here I am in sub-Saharan Africa, alone on a bicycle, white guy with no friends and no cultural understanding, and in a global pandemic. And what are you going to do? So I just started hunkering down, making friends as quickly as possible, and sort of hunkered down in Zambia for initially for a few months. I thought this thing would pass and then something would happen, but that turned into 6 months in and around Livingstone, Zambia.
Gosh.
That's at the Victoria Falls.
Okay. Oh, it's not. It sounds nice. I mean,
in a way, it was. I mean, obviously, the pandemic's been a disaster and worse for many, many people all around the world. But for me, it wasn't that bad. I mean, I'm in Zambia, which is one of the friendliest countries and most affordable countries probably in the entire world. People are sweet. The pandemic is not hitting Zambia. I mean, it's just tiny there, and there's a lot of theories as to why it's not really hitting this sub-Saharan Central African region very heavily. And
are they in a lockdown? Were they in a lockdown?
Initially, they were very careful, yes, because I think African countries are very keen to stay on top of emerging health issues for many obviously tragic reasons, but. In the beginning, they were on a pretty hard lockdown. Everyone was in masks. Everyone was, strictly going about, lockdown type business. But it was a loose lockdown, not a hard one like they had in Europe and the U.S. initially. But nonetheless, people were very alert. But it just became clear as the weeks and months went by that it was just not really connecting. And again, there's 5 or 10 theories for that, and I don't think anyone really knows the answers as to why COVID-19 has not hit Africa, most of Africa, very hard. But it became clear over time that I really couldn't get out of Zambia because the borders were all closed. I did not want to fly home because, I mean, the United States the pandemic was bad there, and it's a political nightmare then and still is today. And now it's even wintertime, so I don't want to go home in the wintertime. So I ended up staying in Zambia for quite a while. And then a lot of interesting things started happening in Zambia.
I saw all the Facebook posts I was following with interest.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I try to put something silly up there, but in Zambia, initially I was just sort of waiting this out, and I'd go for, so as not to lose that hard-fought fitness that I suffered so mightily to obtain in South Africa and Namibia. I would go on rides. I'd go on, 50-kilometer rides or 70-kilometer rides every few days. And one day I'm outside of Livingstone, Zambia, and I'm riding along, and I find a teenage kid, maybe about 17 or 18 years old, who's broken down on a bicycle by the side of the road. He's got a flat tire. And I pull over to help him as any of us would. And his tube had been patched 25 times. And not only was it patched 25 times, it had places where he bunched up the tube where he had a big hole, and he bunched it up and tied it off with a piece of twine like a tourniquet. He had about 5 of those. So I just was stunned by it. I mean, it's like I think about how wasteful I've been. I throw a tube away if it has 1 or 2 patches on it. And here this kid is making it work, and he's stranded. So I had a new tube in my pack, and I just gave it to him. And it basically fit. But somewhere in that conversation, I must have given this kid my hotel name where I was staying in Livingstone. And he tracked me down at that hotel, I think the day or the next day. And not only to thank me, but this time he shows up and he's really well dressed, and he's got a little folder under his arm. And in his folder, he's got all the documents that are important to him personally. He's got his baptismal certificate from a church, and he's got his school report cards. And at the end, he's got his school fees bill, which it's roughly about $50 that they have to pay for every semester. And he can't pay it. And he's asking me to pay it. So initially I'm like, oh, this is sweet and everything, but there's got to be a better solution. So I asked around a little bit, and someone says, yeah, send him to the social welfare office. So I called him. I said, why don't you go to the social welfare office? He goes, well, they move too slow and we need help. And come to my house, meet my family. I'll show you. So one day on a Sunday, we met. We walked for an hour and a half. These guys walked forever through the countryside out there in the savannah, and we got to his little house, a little brick house, and went inside. It's tiny, and his mom and his dad in there. His dad's a stonemason who's got a job injury. He can't work, and it's clear his leg is all messed up, and he can't work and he can't make the money. And the mom's just kind of struggling to hold it together. So we started a conversation and after an hour, I just agreed to meet the kid at the bank and pay his school fees. So the next day, I tell him to meet me at 11 o'clock in the morning out in front of the main bank in downtown Livingstone. And I'm sitting there having coffee because I'm early, and I see a kid across the street in a suit that's way too big for him, and he's early. And I watch him go to the bank, and I watch him stand out front 10 minutes early waiting for me. And so I finish my coffee, and I go over there, and there he is, smiling. He's got his suit on, probably borrowed from someone from his church, I would guess. And I gave him the money, and he went in the bank, and he came out, and he had a receipt that matched the account number on the bill, on the invoice for the school fees, and the kid was back in school. Oh. So I agreed. I was kind of curious to see where he went to school, and it's a little school called Libuyu School, Libuyu, Libuyu. And I asked if I could meet him out there one day. So I went to the school, and while I was waiting for him in the school, the headmaster, the head teacher, came by, and he's a really friendly guy, and we started talking. He said, "Let me give you the tour of the school." So we did a little tour of the campus, and he showed me around, and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing on the chalkboards. I mean, I went to school in the United States, and here we are with all this privilege. And I thought the material on the chalkboards looked like college level. I'm talking the math classes had calculus on there. There was just every topic, every classroom I went into, whatever subject was in that classroom, I was just blown away by the material. And there's a farm on the campus where the kids work to raise vegetables to help fund the school. And then around the back, there was nothing but a concrete foundation, about 310 square meters, 3,100 square feet. Nothing but a concrete foundation and some lower cinder block walls. And it was a laboratory, a science laboratory that they had started 3 years earlier, and they had ran out of funding for. And the headmaster was just in passing showing me this thing, and he was sort of lamenting that they ran out of funds, and it said it would probably be 10 years until they get the funds. And the way the economy is there now, it could be 20. And I just went home that night and I started thinking about that laboratory. I started thinking, what would it cost to finish a school laboratory in Zambia right now, right? So anyway, long story short, I called the headmaster, and we spent the next 3 or 4 weeks hammering out a budget and getting all the everything lined up to restart this school laboratory project. And so that was about July 1st of 2020. We started again. We brought in a general contractor and a crew and started finishing the walls and then put the roof on it. But initially I was using all of my own personal money on this thing because I didn't want to raise any money from family and friends until I knew this thing was going to work. Because you never really know when you're dealing with another culture. A lot of weird things could happen. You could have guys stealing from you. And so my worst case scenario at this point was, okay, I put in a few thousand of my own money. I discovered this is a bad idea. And I walk away, and it's my own loss. But after about 3 weeks, I started to realize this place was not only running and doing a great job, they're running a super efficient machine, and everyone is fantastic. So I thought, okay, we need to raise some more money. And at this point, I'd committed about $8,000 of my own dollars. I'm not some rich guy or anything. I guess something happened to me that I just felt like this had to happen. Mm-hmm. So I just sort of decided that this is happening. Now, through all these travels I've been doing, I write a monthly travel column for a newspaper in the state of Idaho in the United States. And it's kind of a popular column, and it's about 3,000 or 4,000 words a month and some pictures just to give people back home a sense for what the world's doing out there. Right. Yeah. So in one of my pieces, I just mentioned the school, and towards the end, I mentioned the science laboratory we started, and would anybody be interested in supporting the construction effort. And then the story was published, and my email inbox started to explode. Huh. And long story short, we raised, in addition to my $8,000, a little more than $8,000, I personally committed to the project. We raised another $39,000 US, mostly from readers of my column from the community in the state of Idaho, where I'm from. And every aspect of this project, from fundraising, which I was managing on my side, to the construction, which I'm sort of overseeing on the other side, the school administration team, just everything came together. It was just truly miraculous. I really want to say miraculous, just the way everything lined up. I mean, if you decided you're going to go to Africa and build a science laboratory to school, it could never have gone this well. It was just like everything couldn't have been better. I mean, the best people, the best circumstances, not only on the construction site, but in terms of the fundraising. And in less than about 3 months from the time we restarted work, we had completed what the Ministry of Education calls a state-of-the-art school science laboratory. It's 2 large classrooms, fully equipped with gas lines and propane fuel gas lines and sinks and all kinds of equipment and workbenches and you name it. I mean, it's gorgeous. It's a beautiful building that will probably last 50 to 100 years. That will in an underprivileged part of Livingstone, and it's very likely you see not only more scientifically minded people coming out of this school, but never know, health professionals and doctors and medics and you name it. So and teachers, of course. So it feels like we did something pretty good in an unusual time.
Gosh, yeah, the ripple effect, you never know what could come from that.
Yeah, kind of. I think that's part of the reason I did this and put my money into it, right? $8,000 again is a lot of money to me. And I don't have any kids, though. That's part of the reason I'm able to do this trip. And you start thinking sometimes when you don't have children, you start thinking about legacy, what happens after you're gone. And sometimes when you're doing these hard trips, you kind of think, well, it's dangerous out here. You start thinking about what happens after you're gone. I mean, what is the point of all this? So if you can sort of pay it forward, create a ripple effect, to use your phrase, that's kind of the idea. So in a way, it's a legacy in place of other legacies. There could be in the next 50 years, you could have 50,000 kids go through that laboratory. And even if a small percentage of them go on to fields and to careers in the field of science that are productive for Zambia in Southern Africa, I think there could be some nice ripple effect from there.
Did you get to see it open? Did you have a ceremony?
We did. Great question. Yeah, we had a grand ceremony. And again, it was all the school administrators and teachers that made it happen. I mean, we had the deputy mayor of Livingstone was there. We had national media, radio, print media. We had an honored guest who we named the laboratory for. She was a woman who grew up near Livingstone, in one of the Zambian tribes called the Lozi tribe. She grew up in the 50s, came to Livingstone where she graduated from secondary school. She went on to graduate from the University of Zambia, one of the first women to do so in the field of mathematics. She went on to Harvard to get a master's degree and then a PhD from the University of Liverpool in the UK. And then she went on to a great career in the African Development Bank and industry. And so she happens to live in Livingstone. So we found this woman and we named the laboratory for her. At least, the laboratory is actually named for the street where I grew up in Idaho, but it is named in her honor. And so we hope that inspires kids and women, young women, to go have the confidence to go on in that field, because if this woman can do it, I think a lot of others could. So anyway, back to the ceremony. She was at the ceremony. Her name is Gertrude Akapelwa, Dr. Gertrude Akapelwa. She started Victoria Falls University there. She's the founder and vice chancellor of the university there in Livingstone, named for the Victoria Falls. And we had must have been 1,000 kids doing skits and songs and just having so much fun. And there's other dignitaries in attendance, and of course, many of the contractors and workers. It was quite a party. And I've never been married, but it's probably the closest to like a big wedding party, a ceremony I've ever seen. It was classic.
And what was the time frame from that night when you decided to do it until when you opened it?
Well, that's right. From the time we started construction, actually the physical work, it was almost exactly 3 months, 90 days. Gosh. But before that, there was 3 or 4 weeks of laying the groundwork. Like we had to figure out budgets, and then there was a contractor that had built the old foundation and the lower walls, and we needed to make sure that contractor released their interest in the potential contract. So we had to go through a few, legal and administrative loops, and then we had to do some budgeting and get the budget updated for current prices. So there was 3 or 4 weeks in there where we were just feeling it out, and it felt a few times like it wasn't going to happen. And in some ways, when I felt like it wasn't going to happen, I was almost relieved, like, oh, well, I don't have to lose my money and a lot of stress. But then for some reason, it just kept coming along, kept going, and I'm just so happy that it did, because it was just truly a very special project in a very difficult time that employed a lot of talented people that didn't have jobs otherwise because the economy there is so bad now. And in every way, it just seemed like a miraculous project that touched a lot of lives, especially my own.
Yeah, you couldn't imagine doing something like that in the West, could you? In that way.
That's for sure. No, you really couldn't. And the budget would be at least 10 times. I mean, altogether, I mentioned I put in 8,000 and the donors put in another 39,000. Even with that, we still have $12,000 in our US bank account that can go for ongoing support of the laboratory. So the laboratory can be self-sufficient for at least a decade, based on our ability to send $1,000 a year to buy new supplies and new, whatever the laboratory needs, the replacement stuff. So in so many ways, I mean, and back to the budget, I mean, yeah, so the whole thing cost maybe $47,000. That includes a $12,000 endowment fund for future support. Again, in the U.S., in the West, in the UK or the U.S., we would need, again, $500,000 to do something like that. So it's pretty amazing that we can get that done for such a low price and mix employ people and build a legacy that will be hopefully paying, to use your phrase again, ripple effect for a half a century or more.
I think you have to go back, sometime and take a look and you can recognize
Yeah, that would be nice. Yeah, it was a pretty awesome project. I consider myself pretty lucky to have found it. And honestly, I don't think I could have spent that much money and had a better potential return on investment, if you know what I mean. Not that I don't mean in dollars, but in terms of just good feelings going forward and positive lifestyle effects in that region. So it just was terrific. And it brought together a lot of people from my home state. We even got a letter from the governor of Idaho that sent a letter of support and congratulations for the project. And then we were featured in the Times of Zambia newspaper. And we even put together a book. It's basically a picture book of captions that chronicles the construction process from the very beginning to the celebration we talked about. So there's even a book on Amazon called it's called the Castlewood Library at Labuyu School. A team comes together, and again, the book does not sell for profit. It's just we just made it just to create a history book. So it costs about $18, which seems high, but I think it's because it has so many colored photos in it that doesn't make a profit for anyone. But anyway, I'm just to sort of wind that down. I mean, there were so many aspects of that were so wonderful that I just felt like the universe wanted this to happen. I don't think it could have. It wasn't necessarily my willpower or force of anything. It's just sometimes everything falls into your hands when it's meant to be.
I remember you reading about how you'd made so many friends there, and you really made a home there, in such a short space of time. But then you got your Facebook friends to vote whether you should stay or whether you should leave.
Yeah, that's part of, my Facebook friend list is small. There's only about 150 people in there, and only about 100 are active. And sometimes since they're my close circle, I rely on them to give me ideas about what to do. And when I'm facing indecision, do you stay here or do you go, or what do you do? And I throw it out to them. I say, vote with a like for this option, or a heart for this option, or some other option for the third option of what I could do. And I do what my friends say, and it's been working great. I mean, in fact, they were the ones. I held a voting session when I was in Argentina. What should I go next? Should I ride back to the United States? Should I stay in Argentina and try to build a life here? Or should I transfer to Africa and ride a bicycle? And everyone voted overwhelmingly for Africa, and that's exactly what I did. And then it just kept going and going. In fact, every few months when I'm kind of facing one of those indecision points where you really don't necessarily care which way it goes, you just have options that are realistic. You just say, what do I want to do? And when you don't know, you lean on your best friends to tell you what they think.
Isn't that interesting? Because we're all posting all the time about everything of our life. We're broadcasting, me, but we get some likes and that, but we're not after genuine feedback. We don't ask genuinely what, should I do A or B? But, if you really did that.
It is kind of nice to use it that way, to use it as a two-way street, to get feedback back rather than just a like that means someone enjoyed what you said up there. But yeah, it's a way to, I think it makes it easier because my Facebook is closed. I don't, because I'm under a pseudonym there, and it really is my inner circle and people I respect or admire, like you, for example. I can sort of rely on their collective wisdom and their knowledge of me personally to help guide this. Whereas if I had 10,000 strangers in there, I would be more like a who knows, right?
I thought whether to vote or not, but but it felt too much pressure because if you had an accident or did something or I didn't vote. I just felt too much pressure.
I have to say, if I would have a hard time voting on other people too, because. Yeah. But I mean, in some ways, it's philosophical. I mean, you could, something bad could happen anywhere. I mean, people fall down the stairs in their own homes sometimes. So sometimes you got to take a fatalistic or philosophical approach and say, what do we do? What are the risks? And what are the benefits, upsides, and what do you think is good? So. Some things I know how people are going to vote, and when I don't know, like recently, I'm, because I'm kind of stuck here in Kenya now with Ethiopia closed and South Sudan and Somalia being bad options, I could say, hey, should I go on through South Sudan? But I don't think anybody but the craziest people among me would vote for that, because it's kind of a dangerous region. If you read, U.S. State Department reports, it's, I go through a lot of regions that have their own struggles, but South Sudan, Somalia are kind of at the top of their own level. So a lot of times I don't know what to do, and I look for, but I don't ask for a vote. So sometimes I don't ask for a vote because I know what my friend's wisdom will do. But when I truly don't know what to do, and I think that crowdsourcing or the idea, could be a way forward, that's what I do.
All right. Well, next time I'll vote then.
Yeah. There's no, no matter what happens. Like if you vote for me to go home and I fall down the stairs, it's not your fault.
So what happened after Zambia then? What just to fill everyone in?
Well, I had to tear myself out of Livingstone. I had friends and even relationships going, and I really had to rip myself out of there. But I got going up the road, and I had to get to Tanzania quickly because my visa was running low. So I kind of cheated at this point. I took a bus to Lusaka. And then after Lusaka, I thought, okay, I'm going to go like hell for the border of Tanzania. I've still got time on this visa. And I started pedaling. I got, 300 kilometers off the road, and I was dying out there. I mean, and the roads were awful. The truck traffic was horrendous. And talk about real risk. I mean, it's the highways. And I got to a town that had a train that was going to the border of Tanzania. So and I looked at this train, it had a passenger car. So I just, I got a ticket for like $12 in a first class sleeper cabin all the way to a city called Nakonde, which is right on the border of Tanzania. So I basically got to Tanzania a little ahead of schedule, stamped out of Zambia and into a whole new country.
And it was really different?
Yeah, it's funny, as you've traveled a lot, you cross borders, and a lot of these African borders were drawn by Europeans, but they tend to change not only culturally, but geographically. Like you cross the border out of Zambia, you go out of the flatland savanna and into the mountains of Tanzania, just like that. So I went from basically flat country to rolling hills and then even bigger mountains. But in long story short, I made my way across Tanzania to Dar es Salaam and went over to Zanzibar, took a ferry to the island of Zanzibar, birthplace of Freddie Mercury, and farted around in Zanzibar on the white sand beaches. These are basically Islamic islands. They're overwhelmingly Islamic. And then I went to another island north of there that's much less famous and much more impoverished, called Pemba, which is another one of the second biggest island in the Zanzibar archipelago. And I only spent 24 hours there because that place had almost no services to speak of. And it was a little, difficult. So since there's only one ferry a week to the mainland, I jumped a ferry from the island of Pemba back to the mainland of Tanzania, a town called Tanga, Tanzania, where here I'm back on the mainland and thinking about what to do next. So I started cycling towards Mount Kilimanjaro, which is about, I can't remember, about 400 kilometers slightly uphill and inland towards the foothills of Mount Kilimanjaro. And then once there, by the way,
the only way is up.
Country. Yeah, the only way is up. But I mean, even on the way there, the scenery is spectacular. I mean, Tanzania is a very spectacular country in terms of the visual scenery. Zambia, the greatest people around, but it's kind of a monolithic, flat rolling hills, and it just goes forever. I mean, Zambia is even a little bigger than Texas, so it's just a big flat savanna for the most part. So here I am in Tanzania again now, and just seeing all this incredible scenery and meeting great people. But I get approach the foothills of Mount Kilimanjaro. I start looking for a guide, and long story short, I find a guy that's kind of a legendary figure in the region. He was a endurance runner that actually summited the thing in a record time of some incomprehensibly low time. And anyway, he runs a guide service now. He has some of the really good guides in his stable, and he happened to have a 2-man Swiss team going up the mountain. And I joined the 2-man Swiss team plus his guide team. So we spent 5 days getting to the summit and back down. That's really something to be up that high. I've never been. It's about 5,900 meters. That's about 19,300 feet.
Wow.
And I'd never been above 15,000 before. So that was really something. I mean, thin air really does it to you, and I was not prepared. I had a little altitude sickness, but I did barely make it to the summit.
Okay, wow. Oh, and so what happened then?
Well, I could talk about Kilimanjaro for hours, but I made it back down to the mainland, took a couple days rest, and then got on the bike again, and then started climbing over towards Kenya. And I knew when I got to the Kenya border, I would have to take a COVID-19 test. And most of these borders, they have a facility where they stick the swab up your nose, and then you wait a little bit and you get a negative and you go in. Well, I get to this tiny border terminal, and there's no testing services there. In fact, they tell me you have to go all the way back to 80 kilometers back to Moshi in Tanzania to the hospital and get yourself tested, get a certificate, and return here with a negative certificate within 2 days or 3 days. And I thought, oh man, this is a bummer. I'm going to have to go all the way back and take this test that I'm sure I'm going to pass. And I was kind of bummed, but the guys were really nice, and I was too high on endorphins from the climb to really get grumpy about it. So I on my way out to my bicycle out there in front of the immigration station there at the borders checkpoint, I thought, I got a certificate in my bag here, and it was for climbing Kilimanjaro, and when I was given the certificate, it's signed by the guides and the park rangers, and it basically is, I think, kind of a silly certificate that says you climbed Kilimanjaro. And honestly, I didn't want the thing, and I was probably going to toss it as soon as I got into Kenya. But I pulled it out. I thought, what if I show these guards, these border guys, the certificate and say, here's a health certificate right here. And I walked in there. I said, look, guys, here's a certificate signed 3 days ago. And I summited Kilimanjaro 3 days ago. And there you go. There's all the health proof that you need. And they was amazing. They looked it over. They held it in their hands like they'd never seen a certificate like this before. And we're really at the foothills of Kilimanjaro. You could actually go out their door and see it. And they looked at this thing. They had such respect and deference for this document that I thought was kind of like a silly participation trophy. It's never something I would hang on a wall. And next thing I know, they look at me and they go, wow, that's pretty good. Okay, that's good. You must be healthy. And they approved it.
So they could understand the English. It wasn't that you pretended it was a COVID form.
No, not at all. They, especially on the Kenya side, they speak English even better than they do on the Tanzania side. So yeah, they read it perfectly fine, and they just accepted a Kilimanjaro climbing certificate as a proof of health. Now, of course, you could have COVID, I think, and have no symptoms and climb Kilimanjaro. So I guess that never went through their head, but they just assumed that I was not sick. And next thing you know, I'm into Kenya, and I'm just smiling all the way as I'm pedaling out of there. I'm heading away from Kilimanjaro now, heading north towards Nairobi, Kenya.
You couldn't make it up, could you? Yeah.
No, it was just one of those things, I thought, oh, they're asking me for a health certificate. I've got a certificate in my bag that says I'm pretty healthy. I thought I'd go in there, and I was really joking. I mean, no one's at the station. It's a ghost town. These guys are bored. I thought, well, I'll just go humor these guys and show them this Kilimanjaro certificate and see if they'll take that as a COVID health certificate.
And do a nice selfie.
Yeah, we really should have. But I also thought I didn't want to get them in trouble for accepting the certificate when they probably shouldn't, because it's really not a COVID test. Again, you could be asymptomatic, and I guess in theory you could have no symptoms and have COVID and have successfully climbed Kilimanjaro. But anyway, they took it as it was just funny to see their reaction, the respect they had for this document that I thought was kind of silly. So I didn't throw the document away. I think it was partly because of their respect and the fact that it got me into Kenya. I still have it with me here. It's just kind of rumpled up in my bicycle pannier bag, but I'm going to keep it. I was going to throw it away, but since it got me into Kenya, I think it has some nostalgic value now.
And so that's where you are now in Kenya.
Yeah, I cycled from the border of Tanzania all the way to the border of Ethiopia. Ethiopia's closed. I got a ride back in a car, actually, to central Kenya, where I got on the bicycle again. I started, in the beginning, I was just disappointed and disillusioned and directionless after losing my route north to Cairo. I thought, oh, man, what am I going to do? I mean, can't get in Ethiopia. The alternative routes are way too dangerous. So what am I going to do? And I was a little bummed, and then I just going along, and I started to approach the foothills of Mount Kenya. It's green and beautiful. You got spectacular peaks and valleys and pastoral landscapes. And I pulled into a town and started to approach a town called Nanyuki. And I'm going along on my bicycle, and I admit the last 3 weeks have been hard. When you get in rural Kenya, I mean, you're out there with native people and very deeply Islamic societies, and just never really fit in very well. I always felt kind of lonely, like, the old song from Jim Morrison and that psychedelic voice, the Doors, the people are strange. When you're a stranger, faces look ugly when you're alone. I'm sorry, my singing voice. You're not going to recruit me into your band, I know, but women seem wicked when you're unwanted. I mean, these words were never more true than they were in rural Kenya. I mean, I was just really, you got kids throwing rocks at you, and you got bushmen out there waving machetes at you. And then you got
so serious.
Yeah, and you're surrounded by, I think I need to be surrounded by women, and forget about the romantic aspect, just the what you can socialize with. And the vast majority of the women in this area are in burqas, and they're unknowable, and the men, they're kind of businesslike as well. Maybe businesslike is the right word, but I just never fit in. So after 3 months of kind of loneliness, I'm going on this road back to Nanyuki, and I'm here at the foothills of Kenya, and I see something I haven't seen in 3 or 4 weeks. It's a white guy. And it was so odd to see this white guy alongside the road that I slammed on the brakes. And I just wanted to talk to him and see what he's doing here. And he's a Dutch guy. He's a 59-year-old retired Dutch guy, and he lives here. And we started talking, and he tells me, "Oh, you got to stay in Nanyuki. It's a great spot." And I pulled into Nanyuki town, and it really is. It's kind of a tourist town by African standards, meaning it's got lots of hotels and lodges and tourist services, because you're in this beautiful setting here about Kenya, rivers and landscapes. So here I am in Nanyuki. I've been here for 2 weeks now. I'm making friends pretty fast and trying to figure out what my next move is, kind of hoping for some sort of sign, because if Ethiopia stays closed and so forth, I've got to come up with a big plan B. I could always go over to Uganda, Rwanda, look around, but if I don't go there, where do I go? I mean, do I get on a plane and try to go to New Zealand, as you once did back in the day, cycle around New Zealand? I looked at Australia. They're not letting anyone in right now. So cycling around Australia, at least for the moment, is not happening, which is kind of a bummer. So, or I could always fly back to the United States, but that sounds awful right now, winter time and pandemic. And then I still have that motorcycle in South America. So,
you didn't sell everything.
No, the motorcycle I rode to the bottom of South America is still in a garage down there, and I'm in touch with the guy. So but the problem is it's in Uruguay, and Uruguay is great. They have no COVID, but their borders are all closed. So if I go to Uruguay, I'm going to be Uruguayan for a while, at least until the borders open. So these are the sort of the options I'm looking at. What are you going to do when? What are you going to do when not only you have these conflicts north of here on the route to Cairo, but you got a global pandemic that makes getting around and so difficult. So here I am, just sort of in a state of bliss, but waiting for some sign from above about what to do next. But in the meantime, I might try to climb Mount Kenya. We'll see. Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking at this map of Africa here, and you've got Somalia to the east and Uganda to the west. And so are they options? Yeah.
Well, Uganda's an option. I mean, I think it's by travel standards, I think it's a safe place to go, but it's a smaller country. It doesn't really lead anywhere. It leads either to South Sudan, which is highly inadvisable at many, many levels, or you go to Northeast Congo, and Northeast Congo is, from what I understand, the most volatile part of the Congo. Okay. But even if I did through there, I got to go through Central African Republic, South Sudan. You get up to Nigeria, Chad, you're in Boko Haram territory. I'm not necessarily against going to countries that have difficulties. Most of the countries I pass through have these challenges, but these are on another level. Mexico, for example, has some difficult aspects, but I think they're very manageable. But over here, I think it's a little different. And if you look at the State Department, the U.S. State Department puts out warnings on these countries, right? And they rate them. And these ratings are silly, and they're government, of course. But I do put some weight when the U.S. State Department says absolutely do not travel to the X country. Some of that could be politics. They're trying to put the country in a box, but I think others is very serious warnings. Like the embassies and U.S. consulate offices do not want to deal with all the potential problems that you could potentially have there. I think if I try to, let's say I make a break for South Sudan, it's 1,000 kilometers across South Sudan, and I'm a lone white man on a bicycle doing maybe 25, 30 kilometers an hour, slower with a headwind, and the wrong guys sort of see me, and you're kind of a sitting duck. There's very little you can do. And there's a lot of kidnapping through there. There's a lot of just brute violence. I mean, South Sudan was formed through violence a few years ago. And I think that, countries form kind of like volcanoes. There's some rumbling, and then you get some explosions, and then it gets very hot. And then it needs a lot of time to cool off and become whatever it is. And I think South Sudan is very much still in that phase. So I would go to Ethiopia. Ethiopia has a war going on. The U.S. State Department doesn't even rate it as their do not travel list. But the South Sudan and Somalia, they definitely put way up there.
Okay. Yeah, you must have this knowledge that you never had before, now that you're on the ground there.
I do. Not only that, geography. I mean, if you asked me a year ago to take a map of pieces of Africa and assemble them in shapes, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I mean, I would tell you South Africa, Egypt, and Morocco. That's about it. But by being here, you start to really learn not only what the maps look like, but what the politics and the cultures are like in there and how they form. So Africa is a very deep and interesting and complex place, and some places far more than others. It's bottomless. And I mean, you could spend 100 lifetimes exploring this continent and still barely understand it. I think there's just so many every country has many, many tribes, many dozens of tribes. And there's just so much to know and understand. And I feel like I'm always barely scratching the surface. What about all up the West Coast, with, if you could get over there? Absolutely. And that's been on my mind. The trick there, and I think the West Coast in terms of politics and safety is most likely just fine. But the difficulty there is you got so many small countries with so many borders. So I'd have to do a very good study of every country's current COVID policy. Can you even get in, and so forth. And then if you get into a really small country, maybe you can't get into the next country because of their COVID policies. So there must be 15 or 20 countries along that West Coast.
Yeah, there looks like lots of small ones, yeah.
It'd probably be a lot better to do during a time when you don't have a pandemic, so you can have some assurance you can go from country to country. But I mean, you could get to a place called Benin or Togo, and you can't get into the next country over. So there you're going to be for who knows how long. I'm sure it's very beautiful over there. I got to admit, I'm curious, but that if you went up that way, your trip would probably end in Morocco, because Algeria and Libya are a little bit difficult. I think Libya could be very difficult for a person with a U.S. passport to get into. U.S. passport is not, is a bit of can be a little unwelcome in certain countries because of our imperial and foreign policies. So sometimes it's a blessing, and other times I think it makes it difficult. So if I went up the West Coast, I'm saying I might have a hard time circling over to Cairo.
Yeah.
Because Libya stands in the way, and Algeria has some of its own challenges as well.
And 3 times as long, 3 times the distance, probably more.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just, philosophically, just take another year and a half or more to do that whole distance. But I bet it would be spectacular. I mean, I'm sure you meet everywhere in the world, as you well know, great people. Yeah. I'm sure that West Coast scenery is fantastic, and you just learn more. I mean, every country you're drinking from a fire hose in terms of the things you're learning and just getting exposed to, and all the languages and tribes and cultures and ways they do things. It's a deep and rich place that, again, I think is bottomless to understand.
Yeah, I've never been to Africa. It's so close. I'm nearer, where I am in Italy, I am nearer Africa than another European country, than Switzerland, the next country.
I got to tell you, I just think that I hope you get to go someday, because a guy like you with a curious mind and prolific sort of artistic sensibilities could probably find a lot of interesting things to stimulate you here. Again, bottomless. I think I could spend a year in northern Kenya and barely understand it. It has a way of making one very humble when it comes to who you are and what the world is. I think we Westerners have a habit. Some of us have a habit, and me to a greater extent in the past, of just thinking there's a sort of a moral center, and everything is sort of where we're from. We have a sort of a provincial sense about our morality, and you get out there a little bit and start to realize there really is no center like that. I mean, of course, we don't want to harm other people and those sorts of very basic common sense moralities, but in terms of what values people have and what's important and what's rude and what's not, and it's all very different. So you have to go very loose. You have to go mentally loose. Always be ready to adapt to whatever situation and survive on your wits, and that's part of the pleasure as well.
Yeah, especially when you're traveling by bicycle, you are more exposed, but you're also more open.
Yeah, and I think if there's body language and smiles and things that and tone of voice that I think humans just respond to. So if you can always be in a good habit of always being affable and likable, but confident and firm, so don't look like a pushover. I think that's part of the reason I've had the success that I've had. Of course, most of the reason is just luck. But again, in all my travels in Africa and before that in the Americas, I've never really had any kind of problem that would even be remotely serious. I've been very lucky, and I think it's just part of the energy you give off. If you give off a good smile and firm but likable personality, I think people just tend to respond well to that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I remember from my adventures, if I can remember back that far, yeah. But I've kind of living vicariously through people like yourself. We hosted a lot through Warm Showers, the cycling website where you give someone a bed and a warm shower and a meal.
Yeah, I've heard about that. I would love to have something like that because sometimes I have a little trouble finding a place where I'm really comfortable. It would be nice to have a welcome.
Yeah,
but again, there are hotels everywhere. You get pretty good hotel almost anywhere for $5 to $15. When I say pretty good, I mean you've got a secure room that's not too uncomfortable and a decent bed with clean sheets and a warm shower. So it's kind of amazing what you can just find out here.
Yeah, we do a lot with the couch surfing as well as and the warm showers. It's better because you get instantly access to the culture. They'll take you out you've got a guide, included in the. Right,
it's a cultural exchange in a way because you've got they want to learn about you and where you're from, and you get what you mentioned, the guide aspects and the local knowledge. So there's a lot of that can be done if you just have an open mind. And again, to your point, the couch surfing and other sites that connect us have a way of helping in that regard. But I think in the absence of those, it's just good old fashioned being open, likable person. I think that counts for a lot. So I think if one skill I've developed in my travels is just being that whole idea of being likable but firm. A guy that people want to be around, but not a guy that's a sucker.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, really. So you're climbing Mount Kenya, probably. That's what you said.
Kind of looking at it, talking to a guide service, but. It costs a bit of money for basically a long hike. There is an option to climb the actual Mount Kenya itself. Most of the hikes get you very close to the actual rocky peak, but if you want to climb the actual Mount Kenya, you need that harnesses and ropes and carabiners and protection stuff. And I've got a little experience with that. So my real decision is, do I want to just do a really good hard 4-day hike with a guide service, or do I want to really amp up and try to go for the actual summit and do a little rock climbing? And so it's just a question of what's my appetite. And I don't know. Having climbed Kilimanjaro just 3 or 4 weeks ago, it seems like I've still got a little fitness from that it would help. So we'll see.
Sounds like something we have to vote on.
Yeah, it's not a bad vote. Yeah. But in the meantime, there's safaris. Like yesterday, I did a safari through this thing called Opajeta. It's just a conservancy that you can rent a 4-wheel drive here in town for about $60 for the day. And you go in and they have half off entry fees now because of COVID. There's so few tourists. And so for about $45 in a rental car, and, you buy lunch, you can go drive around a big range and see rhinoceros and elephant and you name it. And I hear there's lions and the wild cats out there. I didn't see any, but I hear they're out there, and I had my eyes peeled. But it's a pretty awesome experience to see these rhinos. It's like you're looking at a dinosaur. They're truly remarkable just to sit. We all know what a rhinoceros looks like, but when you're sitting there standing, to 20 meters from one and looking out your car window while they're just chewing some grass and your eyes are laying on each other, it's quite a thing to see. It's quite a connection you make to some prehistoric concept. They're like tiny dinosaurs. I bet they're still huge. They're as big as they're enormous animals, but they're tiny relative to the dinosaurs of the past. But it's pretty awesome. So there's plenty to do in this area between hiking and mountain biking and the safaris and just the local scene. There's quite a lot to offer. So I may be hunkered down here for December waiting for some direction to just sort of land in my lap. Maybe Ethiopia opens.
Okay, yeah. That's just really got a snapshot into your life here, Ted. It's it's fantastic.
Thank you, Jack, for your questions.
Yeah, no, well, I'm going to write a song. Actually, for this, because you've reminded me about my traveling, and I went one of my adventures was around Australia with these other musicians, and we had a small band of troubadours, and they wrote a song called "I Want to Take You for a Ride on My Bicycle." I wasn't actually in the songwriting process of that one, but it became the kind of anthem of our tour, and also it's something I want to give back to all the the cyclists I've hosted and everything. And so this interview here is kind of to summarize. This is these cycle tourists, is to give back to this community of these free wills, free spirits.
That's the idea. Free wheels, free spirits. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good slogan or phrase there. There's something about the free spirit when you just say it's the conscious act or unconscious act of letting go, of just going with whatever comes and sort of taking up the flow, letting the world take you, not fighting the current too hard. Going with what's in front of you and just using the resources that are at your fingertips, like this certificate. Of just kind of using your wits in the moment to figure out what to do. But again, the key thing is not fighting the current so hard, going with the flow, just going with what the universe is bringing.
That unscripted nature, I remember every day when we were traveling was, you start in one place and you finish in another, and there's this huge story arc through the day, and you arrive and you're guaranteed to have some incredible experiences that you could never script in advance. Like if you booked this holiday before, you would never, it's just incredible how things unraveled.
It really is. Yeah. It gives you some sort of faith in, some would say divinity. Some would say, astrology. Some would say it's just random, we're just finding patterns and meaning and nothingness, whatever of those it is. There is something when you're on the road that letting go and just having faith. And I don't mean that necessarily in a religious sense, but just having faith that things are going to work out if you just kind of keep things positive. And again, like that science laboratory, if I just sat in the United States and decided that I'm going to go on a mission to build a science laboratory in Africa, I don't think it would have ever worked out as well as it did, just because it just came together in the moment, and I would have never dreamed that. So you just got to let go, and whatever sees in front of you, just kind of follow that current.
Yeah, and you close yourself off to all these other experiences when you set your sight on one goal like that.
Yeah, I think exactly. I think there's something in our Western nature about just being so ambitious and determination, and from the great English days of the great English explorers and so forth, and the idea of these romantic ideas of conquering or achieving and having a mission and getting it done. Those are obviously worthwhile, but sometimes when you're a wanderer, and my newspaper column, by the way, is called Two-Wheeled Wanderer. When you're a wanderer, you're not aimless. You're just sort of letting go and following the current to wherever it takes you. So I think there's something to that. So
if people want to follow your adventures, do you have a blog, or can they read those newspaper articles? What's the best way to follow you from now on?
Probably, if they have Instagram, that's Two-Wheel Wanderer, TWO. Let me just look it up. I can't remember how I actually spell this. Hold on. Yeah. TWO.wheel.wanderer. And that's on Instagram. That's my handle. My name is Ted Kunz. That's Kunz. You could also find my column with a Google search. I would just put Ted Kunz, Ted, T-E-D-K-U-N-Z, Two-Wheeled Wanderer into a Google search, and you'll probably see, I'm certain my dispatches will come up. I've written 21 dispatches now, 21 monthly dispatches since I left my home state of Idaho. And each one's about 3,000 words, and it just talks about what's going on the road. They come out the first Wednesday of every new month. And really, they're written for people back home. My home state is very conservative. People who read newspapers, the physical newspapers, tend to be a little older, tend to be a little more conservative. So my stories are kind of geared to that audience. And in a way, it's like a Trojan horse. It's an adventure travel column. But in my columns, I'm always sort of working in things to sort of broaden the minds and the experiences and thought processes of the people back home who maybe never had in their lives the ability to go travel very much, or may have some negative ideas about places in the world and people and cultures that I think that can be allayed, but without being in any way preachy. It's very subtle. I consider my dispatch as kind of a Trojan horse. It looks like a gift coming into your house, but there's actually something in there to sort of pop out and get in your brain and make you think about the world, right?
That's wonderful. Fantastic. Yeah. It gives you, such service. Wow. Brilliant stuff, Ted. This has been a great chat. I really, really, really enjoyed it.
Jack, thank you very much. It's an honor to be your subject. And I've, again, so much respect for all of your prolific artistic talents over the years. I've enjoyed following you.
Oh, no worries, mate. Well, likewise.
Okay, all the best. I'll let you go.
All right, take care. I'll follow you on. I'll follow your next adventure, and I'll definitely vote this time.
Okay, please do, sir. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
I wanna take you for a
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review on your podcast app. If you'd like to hear the song again, just go to Spotify, Deezer, iTunes, stream it till your heart's content, or even better, because 1,000 streams buys me a cup of coffee, is to pay $1 on podsongs.com. And all that money goes to pay for the musicians, Maurizio Sanicola and Massimino Vozza, and my researcher Dori Verba, and a cup of coffee. Alright, thanks very much. See you next time.